Welcome to the Growth with AI podcast, hosted by Integrated AI Services. I'm Peter Martinson, and today's episode examines how AI is reshaping content strategy, SEO, and digital growth. Our guest is Pat Ahern, managing partner of Intergrowth, an agency that helps B2C businesses get more customers. Pat, it's great to have you here.
Peter, it's awesome to be on. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. So tell me how you got started doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, so really my agency journey started in, I guess it would be 2015, 2016. At the time, I was working at another marketing agency and met my then business partner. Ultimately, we were seeing a lot of opportunities for things that were changing in the digital landscape and really pushed to roll out a lot of those changes at the company we were working at the time. Understandably so. The business has been around for a decade. And when two 20-something-year-old kids came to the founder who'd been running a successful business for a lot longer than we'd been working, we got a little bit of pushback on our ideas. So their agency's still doing great, but myself and then business partner ended up going off to start our own agency that has since become Intergrowth. So Dave and I really built what is now Intergrowth off of a handful of core premises. But the two big things that we really focused on is we saw so much of an opportunity to focus more on the freelance economy. At the time, 2015, 2016, most agencies were working with freelancers. They were working on what was then Elance and Odusk, then rebranded to Upwork. But we're really trying to sweep that under the rug. It was oftentimes seen as a very negative thing to be working with people outside of your main, office area. And we built an entire business based on that premise. Nowadays, I would say that's just common practice to work with really great minds across the world, whether they're within a 30-minute drive of your office or otherwise. But at the time, it was a somewhat revolutionary idea, I guess we would say. And then the other big premise was building an agency that was really built on process. The whole focus we had from day one was let's clearly document every single thing that we're doing in terms of client services so that as new people come onto the team, they have formal trainings and are able to learn firsthand from doing these things. Really, so that first time they go through and do it with a client, the client is getting the exact same quality they would if I did it or if another more senior team member had done it. So the whole idea was hire the best minds across the world and build a rigorous process that gives room for improvement over time, has flexibility for pushback, but make sure that we maintain maximum quality control. And it's helped us to grow from what was then two guys just working like elbow to elbow in a little apartment to about 35 people on the team today.
That's fantastic. So you started Intergrowth before COVID and before the whole remote work, um, uh, paradigm, changed. So it sounds like you were actually ahead of the curve there.
I would say slightly. I think a lot of clients found it really odd that for the first couple of years of the business, we were just working at our homes. And then after that, we got a small office space. But I think a lot of clients were, or a lot of businesses we spoke to were really confused. Like, oh, so everyone on the team isn't based in Denver, Colorado. How do you keep oversight of them? And I would never understood that question. I was like, we have remarkable people. I don't need to keep oversight on them. Like I have my managerial ways to check in, make sure they're doing their work, make sure quality is there, but I don't need to be checking their Slack icon to see if they're online from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. If they're getting their work done, that's the most important thing.
Nice, nice. So, how has Intergrowth, how has that been building or changing with the adoption of AI tools? And then how has that been sort of working with
Yeah. It has been a really interesting couple of years. So there are a couple concepts I could speak to here. I think the first one that's probably most helpful for listeners to touch on is the improvements in quality and efficiency that can come with AI. One of my views might change on this, but here we are, end of 2025. I think that there is so much long-term potential for AI. I think there's a little bit of over-optimism, let's call it, about AI's ability to reshape the way that every single job works and every single industry works. I see AI in its current form as a remarkable tool that can drive 10 to 20% improvements in either efficiency or quality in almost every industry that we're looking at. And that's really how our team treats it. We treat it as this incredible personal assistant that has a lot of flaws to it. That's not going to be perfect. That's going to sometimes make up facts, but if is properly managed, can be this really incredible tool to help people to be 10%, 20% more productive, 10 to 20% more effective in the quality of work that they're delivering, and really this incredible sounding board for ideation. So for us, we are, I would say, very optimistic and very enthusiastic to test out different AI use cases. We always have to balance that with making sure that we're not letting it interfere with quality of client work, though. So what I find AI really effective to do is use it as a sounding board, use it as a feedback system, and use it as an ideation tool. If we're creating content for clients, if we're creating meta ads, and then treat that as a really rough version one that we can learn from and can build upon with human creativity and human quality control. So AI has been a remarkable tool, and I would say almost every part of our business has been improved by, again, 10 to 20%, just about everything we do. On the SEO front specifically as an agency, we've certainly seen a really interesting trend, which at times has been challenging to combat. And that is with the rise of AI, I think there are a lot of individuals out there that say, oh, well, why would we hire a human being to write a blog article for us or to optimize a website for us? I can just ask ChatGPT, how do I go about optimizing my website? How do I go about writing this blog article? Or, hey, ChatGPT, can you write me a 2,000 word blog article about this specific concept? And just because ChatGPT can spit it out in 60 seconds, people say, oh, okay, well, this is pretty good. I'll do some light editing. We'll be ready to roll from there. So that's certainly one camp that we've seen. I am very pessimistic about people that are using AI for those specific use cases. We've had a couple past clients who have taken that route, and one of them in particular, unfortunately, I would say undid really an entire year's worth of work that we did to help them grow their business by switching to almost entirely AI generated content. Saved them some costs in the short term, but I would argue drove really, really negative return on investment for their business. And that's, I'd love if I could help them to go back in time and undo that, but the damage is done there. So that's been, I would say, both a really interesting challenge on the business side of things and also an interesting challenge on, I would say, more so advocating for marketers out there. It kind of it has the potential to really cheapen someone's job if you say, oh, I can just use ChatGPT to get this blog article. Why would I pay someone $500, $1,000 to write this blog article? So that has been, I would say, an interesting challenge, and I don't have a great answer for how to solve that one yet. What I have seen is AI in particular, in my experience, has a really hard time with brand voice and like call it the human flow of thought that might really come full form in a blog article written by a really talented writer. And that is a big area I see as a big threat for AI if you choose to lean on it for that specific use case. Long term, though, my belief is that we're going to see really two types of businesses on, call it the broad content creation sphere, whether it be video content, written content, social media content, you name it. A grouping one is going to be the businesses that say, we're going to use AI, we're going to embrace it, we're going to have AI handle 80 to 90% of the heavy lifting, and really are not giving themselves any sort of competitive advantage over their big competitors. They're ultimately working with the exact same tool, the exact same data set that their competitors have. They'll enter this race to the bottom where you're kind of scrounging for pennies, using that analogy in order to see like who can get that, 1%, 2% gain over their competitors the fastest. And grouping two is going to be those who say AI is this incredible tool. It can be used as a great, research assistant, can be used as a phenomenal tool to synthesize data sets and analyze, key insights from those larger data sets. It can be a great tool for topic ideation. It can be a great feedback system for the first draft of your article to ask it, hey, here's the first draft of my article. Here's who I'm really trying to help out with this. Based on your understanding of this specific type of individual, what follow-up questions would you have if you're playing the role of that individual? And how can I incorporate those into my article? So that second grouping is really the one that I see getting the lion's share of, call it the value and the gains that come out of the content side of the play. The ones who say AI is going to be this tool, it's going to make us a little bit more efficient and a lot better quality in terms of what we're producing. Let's lean in here and let's really focus on being the best of the best and competing against only the brands that are willing to truly invest in these assets. So that was a lot of rambling about SEO. I think one of the details that I left out of there, though, that's important To me, AI is really exciting right now because it is giving a lot of I would broadly use the term like the small businesses or like the little guys out there. It's giving them this opportunity to, at least in the short term, really compete with much larger players without needing to spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. If I can, and we were even talking about this with this podcast before we started recording. We're recording on Riverside right now. After the recording, you can go into Riverside, you can create all these, or you can get these magic clips, as Riverside calls them, which ultimately it's this incredible tool that does, I would say, like a pretty solid job of taking all these little clips from the episode. We can ultimately share them on social media, and in maybe a $100 million business, they're going to have a full-time editor who's going to take 8 hours to create all those clips. Maybe if our business can't justify that price point, we use these magic clips. It's not going to be as good as the full-time editor, but it's still pretty solid. It allows us to get that good piece of content that we can share and ultimately can scale up our visibility. So long and short of it, I see it as a phenomenal tool. I think for the little guys, it gives you this really unfair advantage, but I would just advocate for using caution and not giving too much free rein to AI, because that is when I see the big concerns coming into play with that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I'm curious, when you're talking SEO, are you lumping what they now call AEO into SEO? And is that sort of an umbrella, or are you doing something different for your clients for agent engine optimization?
Oh, great question. So I wish I could credit the original source. Rand Fishkin did a really good job of crediting the original source of this thought. So I'm going to quote Rand, who quoted someone else. Listeners, check out Rand Fishkin. He's a phenomenal individual, really brilliant guy, exceptional all-around marketer. But Rand brought up this concept of search everywhere optimization, as it's been referred to. And this is how I'm starting to think of the acronym SEO nowadays. Now, search everywhere optimization takes a much broader look at, call it the search landscape, than I think myself and other SEOs traditionally did. Traditionally, I would say you could almost round it out and say that SEO is focused on ranking in Google. Reason being, Google had 92% market share, YouTube had 4% market share, Bing had 2%, and so on and so forth. Factor in that YouTube and Google are ultimately owned by Alphabet, and you can more or less say that Google rounds to having 100% market share as of a couple years ago. Nowadays, though, we're starting to see this new trend where, as you said, we have all these different AI engines, all these different LLMs that are starting to incorporate some form of real-time search into their LLMs. We're also having this really interesting trend where a lot of Google search results are starting to become search pages from other secondary properties, whether it be Pinterest showing up for a lot of like interior design related content, whether it be TikTok showing up for a lot of these trends as well. We have a lot of LinkedIn, Quora, and Reddit threads that are showing up for all sorts of search queries as well. So the idea of search everywhere optimization says, let's, instead of thinking about how do we optimize for Google, say, what are all these different properties that our customers are going to find information? And how can we try and take this one insight that we're putting together and repurpose it so it can be used and it can show up on all these properties at the same time? When I think of AEO, LLM, SEO, and all these other acronyms related to optimizing for large language models, one, I look at it in that regard, that our focus has really shifted to saying, how can we help clients to rank on all these platforms? Second thing I would say that really comes into play, though, is at the moment, from every data set I can see, there is very minimal, I would say very minimal differentiation in terms of best practices for what you should be doing to rank in LLMs versus what you should be doing to rank in traditional search engines like Google. LLMs are still looking at a lot of the same big data points that Google is. I would argue that LLMs are looking a little bit more heavily at what I refer to as unlinked brand mentions. If your brand gets named in an article, but someone doesn't link to it, LLMs place a lot more value on that from what I've seen than Google might, but those numbers are still pretty close in comparison. If you look at the most recent data report I saw, I think was end of 2024, which showed there was about a 57% overlap between ChatGPT ranking businesses and Google ranking businesses, and it was even higher. I believe it was around 70% for ChatGPT versus Bing. And Peter, I'll share the link to that report afterwards so we can add it into the show notes just so listeners can fact check me on that one. At a very high level, I'm seeing a massive overlap for best practices for LLMs as best practices for SEOs, or excuse me, for search engines. I would argue for LLMs, there's a couple things that do come into play that are really important. The first I always tell brands is run what I call an LLM sentiment analysis, which is as straightforward as ask your favorite LLM what its perception is of your brand and look to see how accurate is that overview that ChatGPT, Claude, you name it, ends up citing, and two, what are the sources that they end up pulling in for that information. From there, you can say, one, if there's inaccuracies in the information, we have to look into all the data sets that they're pulling from and see how we can fix those inaccuracies. Two, if you see that there's various sources that are being talked about, especially painting your brand in a negative light or maybe in an inaccurate light or an outdated light, look to see how you can contribute to those areas, especially if it's a forum like Quora, if it's a forum like Reddit. Those are gold mines for you to be able to hop in, respond to customer feedback, and at least get your brand in the conversation in a more positive light. Outside of that, and there's a lot of debate amongst SEOs with this concept called LLM text files. They are ultimately intended to be, think of it as like a one-page text file document intending to tell large language models how to perceive your brand. What is it your brand does, company history, resources to find more information about your business, maybe like shipping information, for example, and much more. I see this as something that probably plays a pretty negative role at this exact moment in terms of how your brand ranks, but I see it as the type of thing that is going to take off and help a lot of brands out as soon as LLMs formally announce that they are going to adopt this standard as a tool that they look at for businesses. And I think as soon as that happens, we're going to see market adoption skyrocket for LLM text files. There are a lot of listeners that are going to say I'm wasting my time by talking about that concept right now, but I would say listeners, take an hour to set it up. Take my approach, which is go to ChatGPT, ask it to create a V1 of your LLM text file, and then just fact check it and upload that to your domain, and you're good to go in an hour's time, as long as you don't need to go through approval rounds with the rest of your team. Highly recommend doing it. I think it's going to give you a huge competitive advantage in that, like, call it 1 month time window from universal adoption of all LLMs to the time that all of your competitors start rolling it out. Gain all those customers in the meantime is my take on it.
Gotcha. Wow. Okay. And then just from a technical perspective, where do you suggest people put those text files on their website? Is that under the about page, or is that on a hidden page that normal users can't get to?
Oh, great question. So this is going to be a file that you're just going to upload to your root directory. So if you are not a developer, I'd recommend loop in your developer and ask them just to upload this so that it shows up on domain.com/llms.txt. If you want a reference point, go to intergrowth.com/lms.txt, and you can just see a sample of what ours looks like. But long and short of it, it's a text file. There's no sort of fancy text to it. There's no sort of fancy design to it. File that is strictly intended for a machine that does not care at all about how nice your website looks. For those who know the robot text concept, it's going to be very similar standard for that, but this is designed specifically for large language models.
Okay. Interesting. That's actually the first time I've heard of that possible process to go in and guide LLMs in figuring out your company and your brands. That's very, very interesting, very helpful. Thanks.
Happy to help. It's a very new technology. I think it was first introduced less than 12 months ago at this point, and most LLMs seem to not pay attention to it very much yet, which is why a lot of people listening are going to say, oh, Pat has no idea what he's talking about. LLMs don't even look at this right now. Again, I see the big opportunity as this is a technology that I think is a no-brainer for LLMs to adopt. It just takes time to adopt new concepts, and it takes people adopting these concepts as well to make it worth the time. So I see it as something that will give you a huge advantage if you decide to roll it out now. It doesn't take a lot of time to do it. And I do see from there it's going to give you this huge short-term advantage until all your competitors start adopting it as well.
Sure. Interesting. So, so what sort of AI have you adopted internally to help you manage your business and your team for automating workflows or whatever? Have you What sort of tools have you brought on board?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm trying to think where to start with that one. I'm going to, just because I think it'll be more helpful to listeners, I'm going to segment out what I would call like the no code automation piece, because that was a little bit pre AI becoming, call it, mainstream. And by that, I mean tools like IFTTT, Zapier, and then Make are really the three big ones, formerly Integromat, that help you to stitch together a couple different tools via APIs to have things ultimately happen on a recurring basis, which is, again, it predates the traditional like definition I think that most people have in their head now. So we can get into that, time permitting, but I'll strip that away from the equation for a minute, because that's really the big piece of how we manage client projects on an ongoing basis and recurring tasks. On the AI side, more specifically, a couple of use cases that I found really effective. I would say very broadly, we use AI as a really big sounding board in a lot of the content that we create for our own website and for clients. Some of the biggest things we'll use it for very regularly, we'll go to our favorite AI tool and we'll ask it for topic ideas that we should look into for a client site, or to target a very specific audience from a very specific angle. And I like to say that our goal is, if we ask ChatGPT, let's say, for 10 blog topic ideas for a specific client, our goal is that one or two of those ideas that it comes back to us with are genuinely good enough ideas that we're going to dive into them and really audit them and see, hey, is there some merit to this? From there, it's more so the manual process, looking into this and seeing, can we find any sort of indication that people are looking for these concepts online? Can we find any indication that people are engaging in online discussions about these concepts? If not, maybe we bring it up to the client, we see if it's an industry concept that's really new that people are just starting to talk about. Otherwise, we scrap it. AI can be phenomenal from there to say, hey, can you give us a really rough outline of what are some of the core concepts we should be talking about in this specific article if we're really looking to help this specific type of individual? Again, same concept. If it gives 10 ideas and 5 to 8 of them are garbage, that's great. You still get 2 to 5 really amazing ideas that maybe you wouldn't think about otherwise. From there, we have a human being putting together their own outline, using some of the ChatGPT or other AI tool feedback to incorporate in the first draft of the article. We optimize and edit that article for better search engine readability, human readability. I love going back to AI tools, giving them the first draft of the article and saying, one, play devil's advocate, poke holes in this, poke holes in the big arguments that I've made, and force me to really defend my arguments. If I'm having a hard time defending it in the article, that means there's holes in the article and I should improve it. 2, it's phenomenal if I can say, hey, here's the really specific type of individual we're looking to help with this article. Play the role of this individual. What follow-up questions would you have coming out of this article if you were to read this cover to cover? And then from there, we can look at those follow-up questions. Again, same concept from the very beginning comes into play. There are 5 follow-up questions and 3 of them are garbage. We got 2 really great questions that we now need to go back and incorporate into the version 2 of the article. And then from there, we can push the article live. We're good to go. One of the things we're experimenting with that I haven't loved the results with is for the articles that we write for our own brand. Oftentimes, I might take the article and, using a couple of different prompts that I've been working on, I might say, hey, ChatGPT, give me 3 different ideas for like a LinkedIn message that I can put, or LinkedIn post that I can put together to promote this article or to promote the key concepts within this article. But outside of that, call it the broad realm of article writing, really the 2 use cases that I'm most excited about for AI right now are, one, using it as a note taker and a tool to, I guess I would say, revisit past discussion points. So one of the things I find super helpful is A, on our podcast, B, on client calls that I hop on or that other members of our team hop on. As long as the client is cool with it, what we'll do is we'll enable the AI note taker. For us, we just use Gemini. There's also Fathom, which is going to be a much more robust version of what Gemini is offering. But Gemini is great. It's included in Google Meet. You add it with 1 click and you're good to go. It's super simple. What we can do is we then get this meeting summary at the end of the call that says, A, here's the transcript for anyone who wants to access it. B, here's summarized notes that we put together. C, here's a summarized list of action steps. And I would say the summarized notes and the action steps, I would give it like a solid B rating of key things that you need to hit in there. It's almost like you have like a not very proactive intern maybe who is sitting in on every meeting and taking notes for you. They're a really fast typer, but they're not doing the best work in the world, but it takes a minute to add this in and you get this incredible resource that you can then go back to We like to take it even a level further than that. And we have this tool called Notebook LM, another Google tool. We actually take all of the meeting notes that we have from these client meetings. We can upload them into Notebook LM for a specific client notebook. And then any member of our team can look back on that at any time and say, hey, for meeting with client X, what did we discuss in July of 2025? What sort of red flags came up on that call? Or hey, within the past 12 months, as we're looking at the end of 2025, what themes came up the most often in those client calls with this specific client? And you can then look back, you can ask these questions, you can create these study guides for yourself. So one, if you want to review key concepts from a client relationship over the past 6 months, it's really straightforward to do so. A, you can read all the notes, all the things that were discussed. B, you can ask Notebook LM directly, like, hey, what are some of the big things that are discussed? What are some of the big items I need to be really mindful of in 2026? C, let's say that we bring a new person onto the team and maybe one of the client accounts that I've been managing, we end up handing over to another person on the team. That's a very delicate process. I would argue that's one of the hardest parts of agency management is transitioning one account to a new person on the team. It's a process we go through very slow and we're very diligent about how we do it, but it's frankly very inefficient the way that we do it as well. Nowadays, if we bring someone onto the team and I want to onboard them to take over one of my client accounts, I can say to them, hey, spend an hour looking through Notebook LM, reading the meeting notes, and then asking Notebook LM to quiz you and give you feedback on some of these concepts. Within an hour, they're going to have a really strong understanding of the key things we've been discussing with that client over the past year. And just like that, maybe they're 30 to 50% of the way ready to take over that client account. And it only took an hour of their time. That's probably the use case I'm most excited for. The other one, and I'm just going to get into it briefly because I know I've been rambling quite a bit here, Peter, and I want to hand the mic back to you in a second. But the other one I'm really excited about that we're, I would say, still in the exploratory phase with is I'm going to broadly say the word taking insights shared by one subject matter expert on the team, plugging them, let's say, into a tool like Notebook LM, or we've seen better success doing this with Claude more specifically recently, but plugging it into your LLM of choice and asking that LLM to either regurgitate those insights in different words so that you're ultimately repurposing that content to be used in a different medium, or two, using that as a resource for you to help with writing, let's say, a Quora post, writing a response to someone on Reddit, writing a potential short blog article, maybe, or responding to, let's say, like a journalist who reaches out to us and says, hey, can you share a quote about this concept? If I've already written about that concept 10 times and I've written 10,000 words about it, I'd way rather hand that to an LLM and say, hey, can you generate one or two good quotes from this? And that's going to help me to scale as long as we can. And the thing we're trying to be very mindful of that we're very focused on right now is making sure that when we're doing that, it's not diluting the value of the content we're putting out there. And a big belief that we have with that is you need to have that really strong foundation of insights that come into play in order to do that effectively. So that I would say is still in the earliest stages. We're only doing that internally for our brand right now. We're not doing that for clients, but I see a ton of potential for that to be used as a tool, provided it has that good training set of data from the subject matter expert in order to generate those insights off of.
Wow, those are some impressive use cases that you've got there. So congratulations for setting those up in your business.
Thank you. A lot of it is having a remarkable team. I would say 90% of that is the team coming to me and saying, hey, we really want to push for this thing. Can we spend some hours doing this? And me just saying, yeah, that sounds great. No pushback on my end.
Awesome. Wow, that sounds like a good team then.
They are.
But I think that that's time for us to start wrapping things up here. So before we go, though, I want to ask, what do you want someone who might hire you to know about you and your agency?
Ooh, great question. I would say biggest thing to know about us is every discussion we have with, call it like a prospect, our genuine goal coming out of it is that we're going to help their business. And in, I would say, 5 out of 10 prospecting calls that I'll take, we'll tell the business, hey, we don't recommend that you work with us. Either one, we don't believe our services are the right fit based on your business state right now. 2, we believe you're better off hiring internally or hiring contractors. Or 3, we don't believe that we have the right area of expertise. We recommend that you work with an agency with this other area of expertise instead. So for us, I always say a win in any sort of sales call is either one, if I sign a client on who's going to work with us for the next 3 to 5 years, or two, if I don't sign on that client who's not going to work with us in 3 to 5 years and I put them in the right direction instead. So if you're interested in talking about customer acquisition, reach out to me, pat@intergrowth.com, or you can just go to our website, intergrowth.com/get started, I believe it is, get-started. But ultimately, reach out to us. We'd love to chat with you if you're interested in hearing about how to acquire customers profitably. We'll see if we're the right fit. If not, we'll point you in the right direction from there.
Awesome. All right. Well, Pat, it's been a great discussion, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time to join us on the podcast today.
My pleasure, Peter. Thanks for having me on today.
All right. Take care, and maybe we'll talk to you again sometime.